Welcome everybody. I think we will get underway fashionably late, as is the New America style. We want to thank everybody for braving the weather and coming here today. I also want to extend a welcome to our online audience, folks who are viewing live at newamerica.net. I'm Justin King with the Asset Building Program here at the New America Foundation. Our work is focused on research, analysis, policy development, and education. And I think this event is actually a pretty good example of how all of those different areas can be tied together. The Asset Building Program is driven by the belief that economic security and mobility depend not just on your job and your income, but also increasingly on one's ability to accumulate a series of assets: a home, a post-secondary education, a small business, savings, a retirement nest egg. Assets have behavioral effects as well. It changes the way that people think about and plan for the future. And assets are a critical way for individuals to contribute to the economic security of the nation as a whole. The idea that any person, no matter his or her starting place, can get ahead and build a successful life is the core of the American dream. Education, home ownership, and savings aren't just the fruit of that pursuit, but they're also the foundation upon which that success is often built. And the federal government supports the accumulation of these assets through a variety of programs. Some take the form of direct spending, others take the form of tax expenditures. But how are those programs designed and administered? Who benefits from them? And as the president rolls out his budgetary plans each year, we ask ourselves, how will these plans help Americans save, build wealth, and take advantage of economic opportunity? To answer these questions, we're very happy today to release the Assets Report 2010. The Assets Report is a survey of the current landscape of asset building policy with an eye towards identifying recent changes and new proposals. We see programs as belonging to 5 different asset building areas: savings and investment, retirement security, home ownership, post-secondary education, and entrepreneurship. And we classify those programs as being asset building if they promote development of human capital through post-secondary education, or encourage savings and asset formation, while directly benefiting individuals and affecting large sectors of the population. In many ways, this is a very promising time in the field of asset building. The President's budget proposes to allocate as much as $700 billion toward asset building activities. There are new programs and ideas that have already been put into place that are currently increasing opportunities for asset building for all families in America. And there are some extremely exciting new proposals that hold great promise if they're ever put into practice. However, the vast majority of current resources benefit middle and upper income families that are able to take advantage of tax subsidies and which promote home ownership and retirement savings. The poorest Americans are offered less attractive ways to build wealth, and as a society, we and they miss out on the potential of assets to help chart a way out of poverty. We're very fortunate today to have a number of experts here to help discuss these issues and what we see coming in the future. Reed Kramer is the director of the Asset Building Program. Previously, he served as the program's research director and as a co-director of our Next Social Contract Initiative, which is an effort to examine the delivery of social policy in the 21st century. And Reed also in a past life worked at OMB, and his experience there influences the Asset Report strongly. Reed's focus today will be highlights and trends from the Assets Report 2010. Carroll Wayman is here as well. Carroll is CFED's Director of Federal Policy. She leads their legislative and regulatory advocacy, including work towards enacting the IDA tax credit, expanding the Savers Credit, and reauthorizing the Assets for Independence Act. Carroll has done work leading efforts to expand resources for the CDFI fund and to raise the asset limit in the SNAP program. And Carroll's focus is going to be on new proposals, including Auto IRA and the Savers Credit. And we're very fortunate today to have with us James Quall. James is a special assistant to the President for Economic Policy and staff member of the White House National Economic Council. He's responsible for issues including higher education and training, labor markets, and retirement. Before joining the White House, James was a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, policy director for John Edwards' presidential campaign, and in a previous life, we overlapped on the Senate Help Committee, which was not always fun. it's great to have James here today. This has been a very busy time for the administration, and we look forward to his insider's view of the budget process and the administration's hearing about the administration's priorities in this area. And without further ado, we'll begin with Reed.
Thank you. Great. Thanks, Justin. Certainly would like to welcome all of you and echo Justin's welcome specifically to Carroll and James. Carroll is a really effective and impassioned advocate who we work with really closely and hopefully productively. And I've been a longtime admirer of James and his work. He's a real sharp policy thinker, so I'm really pleased to have him here at New America, and we look forward to hearing from both of them. My remarks are going to focus on the report, the Assets Report 2010, which really provides an assessment of the President's budget, the new proposals in it, takes a look at the existing tax policies, and also looks out and kind of describes the current landscape. The report was really a collaborative effort. A number of people worked on it here, so I really do want to thank my colleagues up front for their work on it. Justin worked on it, as well as Alejandro Lopez Fernandini, Mark Hulsman, and David Newell as well. So they really poured over the budget with got all the looked at the fine print, and that's what we made our assessment based on that work. So I'm going to give you the highlights here, but certainly we'll invite you to dig in and read the full report, which is in your packets and also available online. So in it, we really describe some of the recently enacted legislation that occurred in the last year that we think is relevant and impacted asset building opportunities. Then we focus on the administration's new proposals, as well as their budget requests for existing proposals, and then review the current tax policies that are linked to asset building. So through this analysis, we trace many of the tax expenditures, as well as the direct federal expenditures that are deployed to help Americans build assets. And we identify the categories Justin outlined of the homeownership, post-secondary education, retirement, and entrepreneurship are really where we're focusing. And they serve individuals, but they impact broad segments of the population. Certainly in an analysis like this, there are some judgment calls to make. There are variations in programs and policies and who's eligible and delivery mechanisms. So certainly there is some art to this kind of exercise, and we invite your feedback and criticism of the work. But I think through our transparency and openness, where we kind of disclose what our assumptions are and what we found, I actually think it's a fairly revealing exercise. The main observation that really jumps out is how many resources are in play. I mean, the overall number is pretty big, approaching $700 billion for asset building objectives in 2011. And if adopted, in a variety of programs, the federal government would allocate approximately $200 billion a year to support homeownership objectives, $182 billion a year to promote retirement security, $150 for savings and investment activities, and a much smaller number, $8 billion for entrepreneurship, as we define it and categorize it. So in the full report, we disclose and spell out what all the individual components are of those figures. But in total, given the scale of what's at stake and the multiple demands on the public purse, I think it's important that we scrutinize these choices that we're making and the allocation of resources. And so I do want to emphasize three main points for this discussion. The first is the excessive use of the tax code. Another highlights the inequities that we observe. And then the third takes note of the redistributive trends that are really afoot in current practices with the new administration. So first off, it's the overwhelming majority of resources in this analysis are delivered through the tax code, through deductions, credits, deferrals. Almost 80%, $550 billion of the total, can be classified as tax expenditures. And this compares with $150 billion of direct spending. So of this $550 billion, $477 billion are the cost of existing programs that are already in place, and the balance are the value of some of the new proposals that the administration has put forward to expand tax credits. And collectively, these tax expenditures, they subsidize a number of activities. Some of them might be very worthy activities, promoting security, maybe promoting home ownership. But the main point to make is historically they just haven't gotten the level of scrutiny as other spending programs, and even though they've increased in size over the years quite significantly. If they got this scrutiny, perhaps we'd learn if this was an effective approach to meeting these policy objectives. Maybe we'd learn whether or not these tax breaks are effective, whether they help get people to contribute new savings into retirement accounts rather than just kind of moving money around, which might be the case, and I think in a number of instances is the case. So the research on this is pretty slim, to say the least, and that's something that we want to highlight. We've highlighted in the past. We want to highlight it again this year. I will say that in the budget, in the small print that we found, there was a commitment by the new administration that was announced when they were describing and estimating the cost of their tax expenditures, committing to a process to assess the performance and economic effects of tax expenditures. And they've committed to beginning a process of analysis, and they're going to focus initially on the tax expenditures to promote savings. So this is a welcome development, especially for tax policy analysts, as well as those of us interested in savings. The second point is really that the majority of these resources are allocated to promote asset building, and then they're going to the middle and upper income households. And this is because these are the households that can take advantage of the tax expenditures, the tax subsidies that specifically promote home ownership and retirement savings. In a recent analysis that we published along with the Economic Mobility Project of the Pew Charitable Trust, and I think I have some colleagues from Pew here, we found that for the home ownership tax expenditures, over 70% went to households in the top 20% of the income scale. 70% go to the top 20 for home ownership. For retirement tax expenditures, 80% went to the top 20 households. So households with limited tax liabilities aren't able to take advantage of these policies. And it's actually pretty striking when you think about it that families with lower incomes and fewer resources are actually offered less attractive ways to build wealth and fewer opportunities. And I think we want to emphasize here that when you take this approach, it misses a real opportunity and the potential of assets to help chart that path forward towards economic security. So that's a second point to emphasize in this discussion. A third point is about the inequalities, and these have been long-standing features of our kind of current paradigm of how we've approached asset building generally, given the first 2 points I made. However, legislation enacted recently in the past year, as well as some of the new policies in the budget, certainly promise to alter the landscape in fairly significant ways. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, this is the stimulus bill that was passed last year, provided an infusion of capital. That was often how it was described, to get money back into the economy to deal with the recession. But it also provided a lot of resources for families on the lower half of the income scale. The Making Work Pay tax credit was one example, and that alone was worth $30 billion this past year. So I think that you want to take note of that bill. There was a lot of elements in there that are described in the report, and their impact on asset building opportunities. In February, obviously, after the State of the Union, the budget was released, and a whole set of new proposals were revealed that were specifically designed to promote savings and asset building activities in ways that really are targeting lower and moderate income families. A number of them are especially notable, which I think we want to highlight today. They're the Auto IRA proposal, which was designed to create access to savings plans for workers when their employers don't offer them. That was a very significant proposal. The expansion and enhancement of the savers credit, which would make this incentive more valuable to contribute to savings accounts for lower income families. That's a significant proposal, as well as the proposed reform of asset limit rules that determine eligibility for public assistance programs. There was a very significant proposal in the budget, changing that so that these rules encourage savings rather than discourage them. So all three of these proposals were ideas that we've actually been talking about and kind of incubating over a number of years here at New America, along with others in the field. And they were featured in our assets report agenda, our assets agenda, which is the report that kind of describes and catalogs a number of proposals in a whole range of policy areas that can help people save and build assets. So we've been talking about some of this work for a while. Carroll is actually going to say more about a couple of these, the first two. And the third, just to emphasize, this one on asset limits, this is a proposal that would establish a national standard of $10,000 that working age and non-disability adults could have and still qualify for public assistance. So families could have this much and still qualify for support. Previously, the asset limits had been set at several $1,000s. They were set decades ago. They weren't indexed for inflation. They hadn't moved. There was a lot of confusion around what they were, and it actually discouraged people from both getting access to benefits and thinking that they couldn't have resources or they would lose their eligibility. So we've written on this in the past. It's also part of this report we did with the Pew Economic Mobility Project that's highlighted in your packets. There's a lot more details here, but the point is the administration has looked at this issue and made a new proposal for raising asset limits substantially. So in total, when you look at what's in the budget, our assessment is that there really are some very significant changes. The administration is clearly committed to the concept of savings and linking it with a broader agenda of helping the middle class, and all of these two of these proposals were included in as core elements of the middle class task force agenda, which was a process led by Vice President Biden and was featured then in the State of the Union address. And maybe James can weigh in a little bit on that and where that might be going. But from a policy perspective, there's a real visible commitment to addressing some of the distributional inequality. So on the tax side, there's more proposals that are using tax mechanisms, but in ways that actually get to people at the lower end of the income distribution. This is using refundable tax credits so that even if you have a low tax liability, you can still get resources back. This is how the earned income tax credit is structured, and the administration has been definitely open to the expanded use of refundability. And what that does is it creates larger tax refunds, which then become a real resource that people can access at tax time and potentially use productively to manage their finances, to begin the savings process. So we've focused on this tax filing moment in our work as well, and the administration earlier this year made a few changes to the tax filing process, which was designed to maximize this opportunity, including putting the option to purchase U.S. savings bonds right on the tax form. And the reason why this is important is that the savings bond is actually a pretty good product for a number of families. It has a guaranteed return, it has low transaction costs, and you actually don't need a bank account to access it. So it's actually a pretty good product, and we're looking forward to seeing if there's ways of expanding its use. And the administration has clearly committed to that as well. So it's a good process. When we look at the whole budget, there certainly are inequities that remain, but there really is a significant redistribution of resources that's really hard to deny. There are proposals that affect upper income earners that would generate actually more resources for government, and then there's greater commitments to allocate the resources in ways that get to families at the lower end. There's the Making Work Pay tax credit increased use of Pell Grants, expanded EITC, the asset reforms, as a number of things that are in the budget. So there's still more to be done, but if the Obama administration is committed to ensuring the country's prosperity and helping individuals move up the economic ladder, I think that they're on the right path. And I think there are additional policies that can be considered. Certainly, I'd like to see, in this emphasis on savings, I think there's too much of a focus on retirement savings, and I'd like to see it expand a little bit more broadly. People have multiple needs out there, and a lot of investments they can make can help them make that bridge to retirement. So I think there's room to expand there, but it's a real promising start, and I think it would redraw the landscape in some pretty significant ways. Thanks.
Thank you, Reed. Thank you, Justin, for the invitation today. I'm Carroll with the Corporation for Enterprise Development, and I've enjoyed reading the paper. I recommend it to everyone. It's a quick read. I read it while boiling some brown rice, so 40 minutes. You read it, you'll be a lot smarter by the time your rice is done. And it's a real sound and insightful analytical analysis of the budget. So I thank you. I would like to agree with, I think, what Reed has said, that this is a time like no other for asset policy in a generation. We have proposals now from the President and members of Congress that are attempting to address the scope of asset poverty and financial insecurity with policy solutions that are really at the scale to finally make a difference. So it's an incredible opportunity right now. What CFPD looks at a lot is asset poverty, and this is how much does a family have in wealth, in savings, that if their income completely stopped for 3 months, could they survive at the poverty level? So do they have $3,000 or $4,000 in savings? And we know that 22% of the households are asset poor. So more than 1 in 5 don't have $3,000 or $4,000 in savings that if their income stopped. And in this economy, we've really seen the fallout of asset poverty. Now, there are major racial disparities in asset poverty. 16% of white families are asset poor compared to 37% of minority families. So 1 in 3 of families of color do not have adequate savings. And a lot of that is a legacy of past racial discrimination, writ large, even generations from the civil rights movement. There's also differences for families with kids. 1 in 4 of families with kids are asset poor, so 27%. Now, how much in assets do the average family have in wealth? The average's median from the Federal Reserve study is $221,000. And that's all of their holdings, homes, stocks, 401ks. But if you compare that wealth to the lowest income quintile, the bottom 20%, about $20,000 household income, their wealth is $23,500. And the bottom 20% of low wealth families is a mere $8,100. So there's a difference between income and wealth, and the lowest wealth obviously is quite low. And then when you look at retirement savings, which has been the focus of the administration, that picture is just downright bleak. Only half of the families, 52%, even have a retirement plan at all. And low-income workers are much less likely to save for retirement than their high-income counterparts. And of the households in the lowest income, only 10% even have a retirement account. And 35% of households in the second lowest income quintile have a retirement account, which is actually better than it was in 2004. We've seen a 5% increase. And then even if you do have an account, the amount of savings that you have in retirement accounts is totally insignificant for what you need to survive. $6,500 for the lowest income quintile, and the lowest net worth is a mere $3,200 in retirement savings. And then for fully 1 in every 5 Americans age 65 and older, Social Security is their sole source of income, 1 in 5. And for 30% of seniors, Social Security represents more than 90% of retirement income. So the fact that President Obama has embraced savings and wealth building for people as a core component of economic policy is much welcomed, because as he talks about moving from a borrow and spend economy to a save and invest economy, 2 of his major proposals that Reed touched on are going to move these numbers, move the dial on these numbers in significant ways. So as I was asked to talk about, I'm going to talk about the Auto IRA and the Savers Credit proposal. One, the Auto IRA, really addresses the issue of access, and the other addresses the issue of adequacy, or to put it another way, one improves the infrastructure, and the other provides the incentives. And both are two of the 5 top priorities of the Vice President's Middle Class Task Force, which is a very high priority position to be in, which really shows the embrace of asset building. Now, automatic enrollment has been the new standard of how do you get people to save, which is you make it so easy they don't even think about it. It just happens, and the wealth builds up. And there's been a lot of extension of automatic enrollment policies in employer-based accounts. And AARP has been really taking the lead in promoting this with their website, Retirement Made Simpler, in partnership with Brookings, that really tells employers this is how you do it. Now, what the president's proposal does is focus at the other half of the workforce, the 78 million people who have no employer-based plan at all. And these folks, as you know, are not going to go out and open an IRA. Almost nobody opens an IRA if they don't already have some sort of retirement savings. Most of the money in IRAs is rolled over from previous employer accounts. So what the proposal does is require any employer who's been around for 2 years or more and has 10 or more employees to take 3% of the employee's paycheck and submit it directly to some sort of retirement account, or if it's a small amount, and for a lot of this it'll be a small amount, there might be sort of pooled or starting funds, like a mutual fund or a I-bond or retirement type savings bond or some sort of stable value fund that the money would go in to be pooled and then rolled over into a private sector account. And so people would be building up wealth. If the employee says, 3% isn't enough, I can do 5, they can. They say, I don't want to do 3, I want to do 1, they can. They say, I don't want to do anything, they can do that too, you can opt out. But what we know is most people don't opt out. So where we are, the president has made this proposal twice in both this recent budget and the first budget. There's legislation pending almost any day now, being led by Senator Bingaman and Congressman Neal. This legislation has historically been bipartisan, and we're hoping that that's the case this time as well. Now, the Savers Credit is already in practice. There already is a Savers Credit. The problem is it's poorly targeted. So only 5.9 million people are actually claiming it. And this is a match on savings put into a retirement account by moderate and low-income people. But if these changes were enacted, the number of people getting these funds would be increased tenfold. And what this would do is help workers build their wealth for adequacy and make sure they have the right incentives to actually save now and build up that wealth. Now, the Obama administration estimates that more than 80% of the savings incentives are going to go to new savers, which is a really big difference between what the current savings incentives and retirement accounts really do, which is just move what people would really save into tax-deferred or tax-benefited accounts. So this is Savers Credit expansion really targets new savings and 75% of the folks eligible for this credit in the change, they're not saving now. So this would be a really major incentive to get people to start saving and create new savings, which is then new investment into the economy. Brookings Retirement Security Project estimates that these changes to the Savers Credit is $44 billion in new savings. So there's legislation that's been introduced by Congressman Pomeroy in the House and Gillibrand in the Senate that would extend this by 3 different ways. Making the credit refundable. The current credit, it's only available to families, as Reed mentioned, the way we do the primary amount of our asset building is your federal income tax liability. Low-income families are paying payroll taxes, sales taxes, excise taxes. Those tend to be more regressive, but there's no benefit to paying those and getting some tax benefit towards those for savings. So this is a very important part of it. Also, it provides a 50% match on the qualified contributions. So the current match is 50% or 20% or 10%, depending where you are. The vast majority of families do not get the 50%. They might get a little bit smaller, and the amounts they get are very small, between 100 and 250 of the amounts that people claim. So a 50% match makes it much simpler to folks. It drops the amount that can be matched to $500 per individual or $1,000 per couple. Now it's $2,000, but it's a much more aggressive match and simple and pretty much in line with what we found that low-income families are able to save, which is about $50 a month or so that they're able to build up the wealth. So coming to about $500. So it's a good targeted amount. It increases the income eligibility to $65,000 by about $10,000 from where it is now, $48,000 for head of household, and $32,000 for a single filer. And then Mr. Pomeroy's bill in the House automatically deposits the contribution into the account, which is something we strongly recommend because we want to build up the wealth in these accounts so that the funds would go directly through split refund form, IRS form 8888, directly into the account and stay there, and then people can build that up. Now, I would like to note one thing and draw attention to one thing Reed said, that these retirement accounts aren't by law just for retirement. You can tap into them for home ownership, you can tap into them for college, for hardship withdrawal. In fact, Vanguard estimates that if an employer offers a loan option, you'll see 13% more of new enrollees saving more money into the account. Having some flexibility really helps people build up that wealth, maybe save more than they think they're comfortable with, and then they're going to be definitely taking advantage of it. So in conclusion, I just want to say that the President and Congress are to be commended and supported for efforts to address the asset poverty problem at scale. I think they're linking the micro problems in a way to build up the financial cushion for individual families, to make sure they have down payment, college savings, and retirements, to some of the macro problems we have as a country. So we need greater investment. We need more money for borrowing. We need to borrow less from our global partners. So that what we're doing with these proposals is sort of moving in a direction that we really need to go in to move these ideas around savings and assets and inclusive asset building into law. James, I think you're up next.
Thanks, Carroll. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've been a longtime admirer of Reed's work and Justin's work and a number of others here at New America as well, so I appreciate this chance. And I think Reed and Carroll and Justin did an excellent job summarizing the administration's proposals and stole my thunder a little bit. But I'm going to talk about how the administration sees asset building as part of its economic agenda. I want to talk briefly about Auto IRA and Savers Credit and asset limits and why the administration thinks these are good ideas, and maybe mention a couple of ideas that haven't been mentioned yet. In general, the top economic priority of the president, of course, has been turning around the economy and getting out of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. And we have come a long way. The economy is growing again. There's some sign that workers are working longer hours. The next step will be for jobs to come back, and that's something that many economists are predicting will happen in the near future. But I think it's important to keep in mind that a return sort of to 2007 is not really a high enough bar, that we need to have an aspiration for building some sort of more sustained shared prosperity that works better for people. When you think about the 2000s expansion, it's important to remember there's essentially no job growth. The employment to population ratio fell. In that time, median family income was essentially flat. There were very high levels of income inequality by some measures, the highest income inequality since the Great Depression. Median net worth actually did grow, but largely because of the housing crisis. I think if we had newer numbers, there would be a different picture. So, Obama's trying to do more. President Obama's trying to do more to build a stronger foundation for economic prosperity, and those include healthcare. Obviously, made a lot of progress in that area in the last week, both expanding coverage to about 95% of Americans, and also holding down healthcare costs or slowing the growth of healthcare costs. Second area is education. And again, just last night, Congress passed the student loan reform bill that New America actually has been one of the most effective advocates for, and that saves about $68 billion over the next 11 years that allow massive investment in Pell Grants. President Obama is on track to double the amount of Pell Grant scholarships available. He's also tripled the college tax credit that's now known as the American Opportunity Tax Credit is 3 times larger than it was in 2008. So that's a very substantial investment. And I think it's important to see building assets and building savings as a similar plank in the foundation for shared prosperity. And savings and assets are so important because they're a foundation, they're a protection against economic shocks. So when families hit a bump in the road, they can counter an illness or lose a job. They have savings to fall back on. It's also, of course, critical to building for the future. And when you think about aspects of the American dream, like housing and college and secure retirement, they all do involve having a significant amount of savings and wealth and assets that can be deployed to those purposes. So to mention a couple of the specific things that we're working on, one is indeed the asset limit proposals, and I wanted to mention 3 aspects of that. One is a proposal to raise the asset protection allowance to $10,000 in all the federally funded means-tested programs. That would affect principally SNAP, the program formerly known as food stamps, as well as LIHEAP and TANF. And the goal there is to reach all working age non-disabled adults. I think having some savings not only helps them with the bumps in the road, but it also sets aside some money that helps them build toward self-sufficiency and get out of the permanent poverty situation. And that's a cost of about $9 billion over 10 years. Important to note also, little noticed, but the Health Reform Act largely eliminated the asset test requirements in Medicaid effective in 2014. So that's an important accomplishment as well. The second area is tax refunds. When you think about low-income taxpayers who get money back because they receive the Earned Income Tax Credit or the Child Tax Credit, sometimes they get several $1,000s back in one lump sum. That can be enough to bump them above the asset limits in some of these low-income poverty programs. The president is proposing to disregard the amount of tax refunds for 12 months, and that will allow low-income families to use these tax refunds as they're intended, which is to support their living standards over the course of the year instead of being under pressure to go out and spend them very quickly. The third I wanted to mention is the simplification of the student aid program, and we're trying to simplify the federal formula for Pell Grants and other forms of student aid for a number of reasons. One is that it's extremely complicated. It's more than 150 questions on the financial aid form. 18 million people a year have to fill it out, and that just seems like 18 million headaches that shouldn't have to exist. But there's also some reason to think that the form itself is a significant obstacle to people accessing the aid that they need. The American Council on Education estimates that there's about 1 million low-income students who are eligible for Pell Grants, are actually enrolled in college and have not filled out a FAFSA and aren't getting a Pell Grant. There's also some evidence done, a recent study that Bridget Long and some other economists did with H&R Block, where low-income taxpayers had their FAFSA filled out at the same time as their tax form. Actually, for high school seniors, it raised college enrollment by 7 percentage points to have this tax preparer fill out their FAFSA and send it in for them, which is kind of amazing when you think about the number of people actually enrolling in college because of that. And I think there's some parallels there to the impact of auto enrollment on retirement savings. It shows that if we do knock down barriers for people, it really does make it a lot easier. A number of things that we're trying to do to simplify the form. The one that's most relevant is raising the asset protection allowance to $250,000 is the president's proposal. The federal formula is actually, for the most part, ignores assets already. If you have incomes under $30,000, your assets are ignored. In most cases, if your income is under $50,000, home equity, retirement savings, some other things are already ignored. But there still are questions about savings on the form. Pretty much everyone has to fill them out. And there is some literature that it does affect family savings, both how they save and how much they save. So there could be a perception problem being created there. There are also asset tests being imposed by state financial aid programs and by colleges. So our hope is that by simplifying the federal form and removing those asset questions, we'll be able to make progress there, both make the form easier and reward people for saving for college and prevent them from trying to game the system by borrowing instead of saving ahead of time. On retirement, as Carroll mentioned, there's the savers credit and the Auto IRA are looking at the problem of participation. We do have there's reason to believe that people are nearing retirement without enough savings, without the savings that they need. Only about half of workers have any type of pension plan. The median 401k balance for workers approaching retirement is only about $78,000. And as Carroll mentioned, Social Security is relied on very heavily among retirees. It provides the majority of income for about 2/3 of retirees. The automatic IRA, we think, will help a lot of folks save. One way of thinking about this is there are about half of workers who do not have access to a workplace savings account, retirement savings account. It's about 78 million people. Now, folks who do have a 401k, about 70% of them participate. But folks who don't, only about 10% go out and set up an IRA on their own. And obviously, there's a number of reasons. You're talking about folks with different levels of income, but it's also an intimidating, difficult process. And there's evidence to believe that, again, giving folks nudges and encouraging them to save has a big impact. Auto enrollment in 401k plans has boosted participation rates from about 70% to about 90%. So we're hopeful that the automatic IRA will have a similar effect in boosting participation rates and savings. The savers credit. Both Reed and Carroll mentioned the regressive nature of our retirement savings tax incentives. Gene Sperling calls this the upside-down retirement savings problem. If you're the top 1% of income earners, you're in the 35% tax bracket. That means for every dollar you save, you get 35 cents back from the government. If you're in the bottom 80%, you're in the 15% bracket at highest. A lot of folks don't pay income taxes, and those folks get nothing in terms of tax subsidies for retirement. From a equity perspective, it seems unfair to help the most, the folks that need help the least. And from an economic efficiency perspective, if we're interested in boosting savings across the economy, there's evidence that it's most effective to target those savings incentives at lower middle income people. So that's what we hope the savers credit will do. Will help remedy that. Again, as sort of some of the behavioral aspects of a running theme, and changing that credit so it's deposited directly into the retirement account, as Carroll mentioned, is an important one. We think it's going to increase the salience of that credit and encourage people to save more. A couple other areas a couple other topics in the area of retirement saving I just wanted to mention. One is the general riskiness of 401k and IRAs. Over the past generation, there's been falling participation in defined benefit pension plans. More and more workers have 401ks or IRAs. It's actually workers are about twice as likely to have a 401k or IRAs than a traditional pension plan now. Both types of plans have their advantages and disadvantages, but I think there are two aspects of IRAs and 401ks that deserve attention. One is that 401k balances expose people to investment risk, and in fact, 401k balances fell by about 30% in the economic crisis. Of course, defined benefit pension plans also suffered large investment losses. And the second is longevity risk, or the risk that you'll outlive your savings, is much more profound when you're talking about defined contribution plans. So we're looking into this in two areas. One is the administration is supporting funding relief for defined benefit pension plans that's targeted to the plans that need the help the most. That means giving them a little more time to make up their recent investment losses. And secondly, the Departments of Labor and Treasury are looking into lifetime income streams. They've published a formal request for information about how we can best harness those types of products and whether there are steps the federal government ought to be taking to encourage people to purchase more annuities or longevity insurance or other types of products. And so that RFI is currently outstanding. I think comments are due at the end of April, and we're hopeful to learn a lot through that process. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention briefly the question of consumer protection, financial regulatory reform. It's not really my wheelhouse, but that is, of course, pending in the Senate. The Consumer Finance Protection Agency would do a lot to strengthen consumer protections in the area of retirement savings products as well as credit products. The administration's proposal would also give the SEC authority to require broker-dealers to act in the best interests of their clients, so by imposing fiduciary duties on those, which many investors think exist now, but in fact don't. The Department of Labor is also engaged in a series of rulemakings that will strengthen investor protection. They recently published a proposed regulation that would promote unbiased investment advice for 401k participants. We think that rule will both increase the number of workers getting advice and also make sure that it's free of conflicts of interest. They're working now on regulations that would require additional disclosures of investment fees to help both plan fiduciaries and plan participants make informed decisions about what the best providers are and do a better job comparison shopping. And finally, the SEC and the Labor Department are looking together into target date funds, which have really grown in popularity. These are, of course, funds that adjust the asset portfolio as you approach retirement to shift people into more conservative investments as they age. But it turns out that the riskiness varies greatly even among funds with a particular target date. So, for example, in 2008, funds with a 2010 retirement date, which a lot of people were investing in, planning for a 2010 retirement, lost an average of 25%, and the returns in those funds actually varied from minus 4% to minus 41%. So these companies clearly meant some different things by the date 2010. It may be if you retire in 2010, you're going to be living for several decades longer. It is appropriate to maintain a significant investment in stocks, but that's something where more disclosure could be helpful and help people make informed decisions. So, again, thanks for the opportunity, and I look forward to the questions.
I want to thanks, James. Thanks, Carroll and Reed. I want to shift us into a bit of a Q&A period and begin that with a request. When we move to Q&A with the audience, if folks wouldn't mind identifying themselves and where you're coming from. And I believe I saw Reed put it this way first. If you could end a sentence with a question mark, that would also be very helpful. But I want to start with the moderator's prerogative a little bit. And I think I want to direct this towards Carroll, but I think it might make sense for James to jump in on this as well. Reed talked a little bit about how there's a focus on retirement security, and we could benefit in many ways from a broader focus in terms of how we incent savings. And Carroll talked a little bit about what the economic picture looks like for the average American and folks on the bottom half of the income scale when it comes to sort of their retirement savings and their savings in general. And Carroll, you talked a little bit about the flexibility of accounts mattering. One of the things I think we've learned from the last few years is we really have seen it demonstrated that people do not, in general, have sufficient savings to bear a shock. And one of the things that we've really been concerned about is increased rates of withdrawals from retirement plans as people have realized their income has gone away and they need to get through this period. They've taken penalties and they've taken loans and they've taken money out of those retirement accounts. So, and I think there's really a fine line to walk there, because that flexibility that's been there has really helped people, but it's not necessarily a good thing in the long run. Obviously, the best thing of all worlds is for folks to be able to do the Michelle Singletary, Susie Orman thing and develop the long term, the emergency fund and then the retirement fund. But I think when we think about Auto IRA and we think about sort of going forward and expanding the realm of retirement savings down into the bottom 50% of the income ladder, how do we walk that line of products that incent retirement savings and maybe provide some protection for people in case of an economic shock, or if somebody has a change in their life course and decides that home ownership is now a more important goal to them than they thought it was 5 years ago, or post-secondary education for a child becomes something that people want to shift towards. Did I end with a question mark?
You raised your voice at the end.
Is that right?
So I think that
Thank
counts
you.
as a question mark. Thanks, Justin. I think the way you talk about retirement savings has to be one of transparency, clarity, and flexibility. And by that, and what we have now isn't that, right? Now it depends on, can you take loans from a 401k? Sure, if your employer allows it, depending on the employer. What about an IRA? No, you can't. So I think the way people think about retirement accounts isn't what's the alphabet soup retirement I'm in? Am I an IRA or a 403b or a 401k or 457? It's sort of, I'm in a retirement account. I think that the usual response from everyone is, oh my God, leakage. We don't want leakage. Don't touch it. Put it in until you're 59 and a half. And when we're reaching to the bottom 50%, as you asked, Justin, that's not really the right message. That we want you to put this money in a lockbox, throw it to a previous presidential candidate, put it in a lockbox and don't touch it, isn't the right message. We're going to see a lot more savings if we encourage people to save as much or even more than they're comfortable with, knowing that they have some flexibility, but then having a lot of transparency and information on the back end when people are thinking about taking a loan or taking a withdrawal of what is this going to cost me? What are the trade-offs? Am I going to use this money? Do I need this money no matter what? If I'm not going to get it from a 401k, where am I going to get it from? Something that pays a higher, that charges me more to borrow money than what I'm getting on my 401k. If what I'm getting is something like a college education or a house where I'm actually building wealth with a down payment that I wouldn't have if I hadn't put my money in this account, gotten my employer match, gotten the saver's credit. I've got a down payment I wouldn't have had otherwise, and I'm going to be better off buying a house now and then putting more money into my 401k. So I think that there's a lot of really good evidence just in the last year or so around hardship loans and around withdrawals that show that the average household can save $275 by taking a loan from a 401k instead of just regular commercial credit for a savings of over $5 billion.
James, do you want to add anything to that?
Thanks. I would just add, it's interesting, there's an echo of this question, too, on the question of lifetime income streams. And if you do think that people would be better off converting their retirement savings into a guaranteed stream of payments over the rest of their retirement, one of the reasons that many folks are reluctant to do that is because it feels very risky to them. They may need the money in the short term. And so there's a similar dilemma there where there's a trade-off that Justin referenced, where in the long term you want to have robust monthly payments that come as long as you live. On the other hand, you may need some flexibility to access that funding due to unexpected circumstances.
Yeah, the point I'd make, there's a lot to say on this topic generally, but people have diverse savings needs that I think we want to see recognized, and the policy has kind of unfolded over the years in a haphazard way. We've had a proliferation of savings accounts. It's a very confusing terrain. That I think that as tax reform is kind of on the horizon, savings should be central to that discussion. And when we simplify and consolidate the accounts, we should be thinking of the retirement stream and the intermediate savings stream and needs that people have, as well as flexible emergency savings as well. And it's a simplified framework that I think would be quite constructive to interject into that discussion when it takes shape. In the short term, we still have all these confusing rules about governing IRAs and 401ks, and people think of them as retirement accounts, but the rules are that you first-time home purchase up to $10,000, or post-secondary education, although they're treated slightly differently, that people understand that's probably a historic accident, and there could be some other ways to kind of streamline those rules to make them clear as well. So I'd put them on those comments on the table for James to take back to his colleagues.
I think actually we should turn it over to the audience at this point. Are there questions for James, Carroll, and Reed? start right here. And if we could just wait for the microphone, that would be very helpful for our online viewers and posterity. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott Winship from the Pew Economic Mobility Project. My question is for James. Was just wondering whether there's ever been any consideration or whether there are reasons why this is a really bad idea, whether extending the savers credit to other savings accounts, such as education savings accounts, has ever been on the table.
It has something that, there has been some internal conversations about it. I think those conversations will continue. I think the advantages are pretty clear. We want more folks saving for college. We want more low-income folks saving for college. One of the dilemmas you struggle with the existing college savings accounts is that those accounts have been very regressive historically, and the Treasury Department published some data last September which shows just how skewed they are toward high-income taxpayers. And so that's one issue that you want to overcome. Perhaps the savers credit could help address that. And then the other question is how much money do low-income folks have to save, and do you want them setting it aside for a retirement account that's does allow some withdrawals for college, or do you want them set aside for a 529 or one of the other college savings credit? But I would appreciate the chance to continue the conversation on some of these trade-offs.
Since James, Carroll, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add that there are things on the table right now. Mr. Pomeroy and Mr. Teaberry, among others, have a bill extending the savers credit to 529s, although it's not, their bill doesn't make the savers credit refundable, so it extends sort of the regressivity problem that we currently have. And then there's been some discussions within the assets advocates community of if we're setting up an Auto IRA system where people have their money going to a retirement bond or an I-bond or a mutual fund without the savers credit match, or undermining the whole goal of building up retirement savings. So as the administration and the members of Congress look to the Auto IRA and coming up with a pooling account, you want to make sure that pooling account is eligible for a savers credit match.
And just to note, we have a whole effort here at New America to promote increased savings for post-secondary education led by Jackie Williams. It's called the College Savings Initiative, and this is one of the ideas of trying to promote increased savings in ways that are a little bit more progressive. So just wanted to put that out there. Maybe Jackie will have a contribution, or at another time we certainly want to highlight this concept as well.
Yeah. I want to just quickly, I kind of want to follow up with James a little bit, because you talked about sort of the regressive nature of a lot of college savings now, and that leads me to think a little bit about sort of refundability. And it leads me to think about the focus that the administration has put on refundability to this point. Expansion of the EITC through the Recovery Act. You proposed permanency for those, or at least some of those expansions in the budget this year. There's actually also a small step away from refundability in the child tax credit proposed in this year's budget. But can you talk a little bit about the administration's sort of attitude towards refundability? Do you see sort of changing perceptions in Washington writ large? And really I'm thinking about sort of the Congress and how you sell refundability to the Congress.
Caught between microphones. I think it is important to keep in mind that folks that aren't paying income taxes are in fact paying thousands of dollars in state and local taxes and sales taxes, something Carroll mentioned in her remarks. So the caricature that this is, checks going out the door to people that don't pay taxes is really not accurate when you consider the payroll taxes and the tax system as a whole. There was an influential paper written by Peter Orszag and some others about the economic merits of refundable credits. There's a number of arguments in that paper, but they're simpler. They can have a bigger effect on behavior because folks may not know what tax bracket they're in, or even if they are fairly aware taxpayers, they may not be able to predict what tax bracket they'll be in by the end of the year. So making a credit refundable is more likely to have behavioral effects. It's also more equitable over time as folks go in and out of different tax brackets. Sort of a tendency to think of someone as a 15% bracket person, but in fact, people do vary. And if you're interested in having an impact in their life over a number of years, it makes a lot of sense to make it refundable. And then the last point I'd make is one that has been mentioned several times. The regressivity of a lot of these current savings incentives and home ownership incentives really do give a lot more to the folks at the top end of the income scale. And it doesn't really seem clear why there's a strong there doesn't seem to be a good policy reason to structure these things as deductions, which are more regressive, rather than structuring them as credits, which can have wider participation.
Yeah, great, thank you. I think I saw a question over here. Yeah, absolutely. Just hold on for 1 second.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Shubatowski. I'm an Emerson Fellow with the Congressional Hunger Center. And I used to work at a VITA tax site helping people to access the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. And my experience was that many people were lacking even basic checking and savings accounts. And I was wondering if you could speak to whether there's anything on the horizon for engaging low-income earners in the traditional banking system as well.
And before we jump into that, I would note that the assets report shows that there's a $4 million cut proposed by the administration in funding for VITA sites. So take that, James, and go ahead and run
Thanks
with
a lot.
You're welcome. Well, I did you a favor by mentioning that it was a $4 million cut, not a 33% cut. So, oh, and I undid the favor.
Well, there is something in the budget called the Bank on USA, which is going to be a grant program run out of the CDFI fund, which is designed to get kind of good ideas and practice at the local level to increase access to safe and affordable financial services. There's a number of things that are going on across the country that actually we at New America have been promoting this kind of concept of bank on. Our colleague Ann Stuhldrea in San Francisco helped launch the effort out there, and it's taken shape across the country. It's still very uneven. We're not sure where the best practices are. That's why an effort like this, which I think is $50 million, so still a little bit, but enough to kind of see if we can scale that up. So another good step, but clearly not enough to address the real problem, which is a lot of people don't have access to these basic bank accounts. They're either underbanked, they're using alternative financial practices that are really debilitating, and it's a major kind of policy area that needs greater work. I also would put out the idea on the table that in the UK, and it's been part of kind of past ideas here in the U.S., they're saying that everybody should have access to a basic bank account. It just should be something that a low-cost, high-quality banking account should be accessible. It's just going to be something that everybody needs to deal with the 21st century, managing their resources, managing their money. So it's another idea that we'd like to kind of elevate and look for innovative ways to promote. And maybe the administration's Bank on USA will be a way to do that.
And I think financial regulatory reform and changes, Sarah, to the CRA, Community Reinvestment Act, around the services test, and expanding that could also be a really major way to get more low-income families, low-income individuals into banks and giving them products that make sense for them financially.
And one more thing that we hope will have an impact is the asset test proposals on the means tested programs, which those asset tests may be keeping people out of the formal financial system.
James, how into this is the president, this financial reform debate, and specifically the ability to make sure that these consumer protections, there's a kind of a strong agency or entity. We've heard him talk about it recently. Is this kind of moving right up to the top of the agenda?
Yeah, he's very committed to this. From the time he took office, he's always talked about financial regulatory reform as one of his very top priorities. And I think you'll continue to see that.
I think in the back here, yeah.
My name is Terry Feinberg, and I'm with University of Illinois Extension, so you can imagine that my question has something to do with education. I'm just wondering if there are any provisions or consideration being given to addressing all of these hopefully new pieces of legislation that will be for an audience that, at higher education, savings accounts, home ownership are probably not even on their radar. But yet now we might have provisions for it to be in greater capacity than we've had in the past. And I'm wondering if there's been any consideration to how these populations, especially those who are not in major urban centers, will get this information, and if there's an education process behind it.
I'm sorry, the question is the outreach around these changes?
How will you get this information to that population?
And the information being about the stuff that has just been enacted?
Absolutely, or those that are in the pipeline to be enacted.
Well, I can speak certainly to the education changes that have just been won. I mean, the bill that has not yet been signed includes about $40 billion for Pell Grants. It's, as I said, part of a series of bills that have doubled Pell Grant funding. In that case, we have a lot of colleges, of course, across the country who are getting the word out. Arnie Duncan did something in Chicago where he worked through high schools to hold them accountable for the number of their students that had filled out the FAFSA, and he was able to send principals updates on the number of their students who had filled it out and who hadn't, and the principals were able to go around people up, and that seemed to have a big impact on college going there. So that is something that we're looking at specifically as a way to get the word out, and of course we continue to be strong supporters of the Gear Up program and the TRIO program and some of those other outreach programs.
And CFED's launched a Savers Credit Alliance, which is a list of national and statewide organizations that are supporting the expansion of the Savers Credit. It's cfed.org. We also sent material out to the 500 corporations that are doing automatic enrollment and encourage them to join the Savers Credit Alliance, and also encourage them to put a completed Savers Credit form, IRS Form 8880, into the W-2s that they're giving to employees. So employees not only get their W-2s, but see that they have this much money in their retirement accounts, and they should try to claim the Savers Credit.
I want to see if we can first get the left-hand side of the room involved and stack up a couple of questions as we are coming up on the witching hour, as it were. So we'll do a couple more questions if folks have them. But before we do that, let me actually follow up on one item that everybody touched on a little bit, which is the Vice President's Middle Class Task Force, which I think was actually a very productive effort in the first year of the administration. We saw a lot of, I think, good work come out of that, and a lot of, I think, the groundwork for the high-profile proposals that we saw in the budget and in the State of the Union really make their first appearance in reports out of the Middle Class Task Force. Middle Class in America, which came out of Department of Commerce, is a really interesting snapshot of what life is like in terms of spending and saving for the middle class in America. And that focus on saving from the administration we greatly appreciate. James, can you give us a bit of a sense of sort of what the future holds for the Middle Class Task Force? Are we going to continue to see them be an active presence, and what sort of further work, if you can get specific at all, can we expect?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think you're right that they have been a very effective organization. They focused, it's a top priority of Vice President Biden. He spent a lot of time on it, and he has regular access to the president. He has enthusiastic participation, a number of cabinet members. My boss, Larry Summers, has been to a significant number of brainstorming sessions around the Middle Class Task Force. He's focused on a couple of areas that the vice president has identified as particularly important: retirement, higher education, workplace quality. They actually just yesterday got their first victory. The Middle Class Task Force was the champion for the proposal that student loan payments be capped at 10% of discretionary income, with any remaining balance forgiven after 20 years or 10 years for public service workers. That was something they proposed, I think, in February, maybe at the very end of January, so about a month ago. and here it is. It just got passed by Congress, so that's pretty good. That's pretty good results.
Make people jealous with that kind of track record. It usually takes a bit longer than that. If we can, right over here, yeah.
I'm Erin Courier with Pew's Economic Mobility Project. Thank you all for a very helpful panel. My question is, as there has been so much enthusiasm from the administration and it seems bipartisan support in Congress for things like Auto IRA and Savers Credit, if you all are reading the tea leaves, what do you think the chances are that these pieces of legislation will move this Congress? And specifically for James, how aggressively do you feel the administration will push Congress to take up these issues?
They're important issues to us. They were proposals from the campaign. They've been proposed last year. They were proposed this year. I think the legislative outlook is difficult to predict. There's a series of jobs proposals lined up. The Auto IRA and the Savers Credit are likely to require bipartisan support. That's something that they've earned in the past that we think that they're capable of earning. But I think at this point, the administration will be actively pursuing those proposals, but it's difficult to predict what's going to happen. I don't know if, Carroll, you want to add to that?
We're following a tax bill is when this is the opportunity, and I think there's a lot of issues in play. We have a new chairman of Ways and Means, as folks know, and Chairman Levin is going to put together a small package of really targeted tax cuts based extending some of the Bush tax cut era or AMT issues and include this, or if they want to have a major tax reform. I think the time's really running out for major tax reform, so it's going to be, I think there's a lot of variables, and with the biggest one, of course, being the Senate schedule, and that they still have a lot of things to move out of Senate Finance, Health just through, but now they have an energy bill and other issues.
And I think regardless of what happens this year, I think these are kind of proposals that will still be foundations for future budgets. I mean, they got there from the beginning, and I think they'll be there down the road too. So,
yeah. I want to just sort of as a last opportunity, I promised our panelists that they would be able to ask each other questions. We've done that a little bit, but I do want to give one last opportunity if there's any burning issue that folks think remains unaddressed.
can we ask about Larry Summers?
Yeah. We already talked about that. No, I really want to thank James and Carroll and Reed for their time today. You can find more information about a lot of the topics that were discussed today on our website, newamerica.net. For folks in the room, I think the panelists will probably be hanging around for a couple of minutes and will be available for some conversation and follow-up at that point. But thank you all very much for being here today. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.